Oh, it gives me a little warning.
Okay, good. It's still setting it up for me. Does it say that it's live for you?
It says meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Okay, great. Well, that's what we'll assume is
Mm,
happening.
Wonderful. Let's do
Oh, just
this.
a little warning. Okay, good. So then I need to close it down on my screen. Okay. This happened last time, didn't it?
It
Yeah.
does.
So I closed the browser and now we're live. Just-
Good morning, Lisa. How are you?
Anna Maria. Oh, I'm happy to see you.
I'm happy to see you too. I'm excited for today's topic.
Yeah, me too. It's been, I mean, I think in a way, like this is the topic that is always in our systems on some level, you and I, right? Like it's like the air that we breathe, the water that we swim in. Even if we don't name
Exactly.
it, it's like we're constantly relating with this topic because of the culture we live in and because of the culture that we're actually moving from, which is a little different than the culture that we live in.
Exactly. We're kind of like those fish with legs.
Oh yeah, that's funny. That's fun. Yeah, I'm having like little flashes into like ponds, and tadpoles and like that in between. Oh, it's such a cool like metamorphosis to literally watch how like
Yeah.
tadpoles grow legs and then they become frogs and then they, evolution, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
So if you're just joining us now, and haven't read or don't know about what we're talking about, we're we're talking about how our culture is really oriented into, well, thingness in a way, and also separation, and in so in because of that, treats us as kind of machine-like machines to be
Mhm.
fixed, and we're in our work, and Anna Maria and I's work, we don't look at ourselves or our clients in that way. We have a relational approach, and
Mhm.
we are not interested in fixing as much as relating with
Mhm.
ourselves and each other to see what's happening, like what's going on here in these systems
Yeah.
and what needs support in these systems. And
Yeah. Yeah. And I have a teacher who calls it using your relational embodied presence.
yeah, wow, I love that phrase.
I love that phrase too. And um, when we got away from working more directly with nature, we started learning about amazing things like the assembly line, which, are really great for automated machine like procedures, but not so great for growing living things. But
Yeah.
we want to apply those fixes everywhere, and it gets into trouble.
Yeah, I was thinking this morning, like there's so many nuances in all of this. Like it's within the machine world, there is some kind of relationality happening, right? There's cause and effect, and there's a different exchange of dynamics that are kind of always present in any dynamic.
Mhm.
And so, like, you and I, we always remind ourselves and our listeners, it's not either or. It's not machines are bad. It's not, it's not that
Right.
kind of binary. Machines are super useful. Like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, are you
Yes.
kidding? Like, I was just in New York City, and like we did the subway everywhere. And I mean, the subway system is, holy moly, like it's fabulous. It's
Yes.
so amazing. And so there's both machinery and people working that system, right? Relying on each other to
Mhm.
produce this mass transport.
Yeah.
Um, and that could go in a whole other direction. But what I was pondering this morning is, what's missing in machines that I don't think any kind of I don't know for sure, but I don't think any AI can replicate is heart. And
Mm.
is the space of heart space, or sometimes I call
Mhm.
it like moving heart first, or which is relational in its essence and its core. It's always heart space is whether we want it to be or not, is always in
Right.
interdependency of all the layers and levels, right?
Right.
Um, and so machines are great, but there's a limitedness by design.
Right.
It's
And I
like,
forget who said it, but it's just such a great idea that the danger is not that machines become too human, but that
mm,
humans become too
oh
machine-like.
my gosh.
Isn't that amazing? I
It's amazing.
can't take credit for that, and I don't remember where I read it, but yeah, yeah, that we need that heart space.
We do. And I think this culture, it's hard to be in heart space in this culture. You know, we're in a current time of perhaps more heart space than ever in a way, but
Mm.
we've had thousands of years of oppression, stacked, and we live
Mhm.
in a late stage capitalism, and the disparities keep growing, and so I think when we've lived in an oppressive culture, it's hard to be in heart space because there's so much
Yeah,
need to defend and protect based on culture's creations of disparity, really, of capitalism. And so to be in heart space, whew,
right. And it can trigger a little bit of despair,
oh my gosh.
because you can feel really alone if you're committed to being in heart space and you don't have a supportive community.
Mhm.
You start to feel crazy. Like, am I seeing the world completely wrong?
Yeah.
But you just need one person.
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you're bringing this
Yeah,
up because
yeah,
this
no,
is a very common thing that my clients will bring in,
yeah,
particularly the ones who've been through my courses or in my courses. They
mhm,
name out, like they've been really naming out loud with each other, like, gosh,
yeah,
this is a different journey than a lot of people are on. And I'm feeling that the reality of um, how we're orienting and paying attention is different than how culture wants us to. And so that loneliness can come in, and it's why we need community, right? It's why we need each other. And like you said, one person, right? One
just one
person
person.
can
Yeah,
make a huge difference. And I
yeah,
think that's why I really love our walk and talks. It's like there's something in my system because we are relational creatures, that gets
mhm,
fed so much, and just like if no one
yeah,
listens to this, like, okay, like
that's
it's a win
fine.
no matter what, if I have to use that language, because like I get to be with you. My
Yeah,
cellular network, my mirror cellular network is like being fed by our
yeah.
relationship right now, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's not just the doubt and the despair that creeps in, but sometimes because we are relational, we want to help other people, or we want to reach out to the systems that we're in and want to affect change. And that's an even bigger hurdle sometimes because people can't see it. They see the heart, they see the benefits of whatever it is you're doing, and they ask, "What are you doing? What's different? What do you know?" But you tell them, and they either give you a blank stare or they run away screaming because it just sounds so either ridiculous or nonsensical to them. They don't understand. They cannot understand. They're so firmly in the other paradigm that they can't understand.
Yeah, fear will do that, right? And we've created, our culture is banking literally on fear. And I
Yeah,
think that, as survivors, um, that fear is well warranted. And what
mhm.
it can do is make us fear even those who are in heart first and what we don't
Yes,
understand, right? So in some of my communities of practice, like we talk about that, like, yeah, our doubt and our skepticism of abundance is going to be real. Our doubt and our skepticism of people bringing in new
right.
ways of connection, like that doubt and skepticism is going to be real.
Yeah,
And that is hard. That's challenging to walk into a space, um, knowing that you're aligned with integrity and having people doubt you, right? And having
exactly.
people make up stories about you.
Right.
That's definitely one of my things from 2022 that's really been big that I've been really processing like how that happens in very well-intentional communities. A lot of doubt and fear gets projected. It's just
Hmm.
how it is. And can we stay steadfast in love even when that fear and doubt is being projected onto us? Well, that's a moment by moment question for me.
Mm.
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. And then
Yeah.
later I might be like, oh gosh, I responded to fear with fear, or I responded
Hmm.
to fear with
Hmm.
my own then
Right.
projections, right? And can I use my
Right.
practices to come back
Exactly.
to clarity?
And the practices are really important. I was thinking of all this in regards to a question one of your students had posed, I think,
Mhm.
about like,
Yeah.
what do you do when the system you're in doesn't respect you as an organic living being? And
Mm.
I was thinking how
Mhm.
vis-a-vis resistance from the system, right? We live both within our own nervous system and within a greater system, right?
Yeah.
And either way, we never push against
Mm.
pain. We never stretch or strain, because that's when those
Mm.
fears come up. That's when people start to feel unsafe. And the minute people start to feel unsafe, they shut down or they appear to be functioning, but they're not in an optimal state to learn, right?
Yeah.
Because this is all learning.
Yeah.
And so having an embodied practice for me, since I work mainly with the body, of knowing that there will be progress, more progress. There will be more progress if I back off and do
Mm.
only the small, slow, safe thing.
Yeah.
Means that tomorrow I get to do the next small, slow, safe thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you said back off, I was like, oh yeah, slow down. And then you said slow down, right? And so
Yeah, yeah.
it's not like we back off and ignore or dismiss or
No.
bypass or, it's, or say, well, that's, whatever. Like it's more like we slow down to, to bite size or
Hmm.
to see what's possible in this moment, right?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I mean, our systems, as we know, our institutions and our cultural systems are not designed to support heart spaces we're talking about, and so that question is, oh shoot, I had it, I had it up on my screen, then I've lost it, but
Okay.
they are, yeah. How do we stay? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to connect to this question, but how do we stay? Um, um, I want to say, I want to almost bring it around as like, how do we stay nurturing our systems when we're in unnurturing systems? Right? How do we stay in nurturance? How do we stay in wise practices? How do we honor our nervous systems and our brains? Like, how do we do that
Hmm.
when we're in structures or in systems who are just really worried about output?
Right.
Or whatever words we want to give to it.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing, well, I don't know about the first thing, but one thing is to be like, yeah, some of these structures are not interested in our well-being,
Mhm.
right? And it's maybe not all or nothing. Maybe they are in some ways, and maybe they aren't in other ways, right? And so that even that discernment's useful, right? Be like,
Yes.
oh gosh, this business is really interested in this. It's not that they don't care at all about me. They do care about me, and I can see it in this way. So like already we want to slow down and discern. We don't want to go into this all or nothing, because it's
Exactly.
such a victim place to be like, I'm just effed in this situation, right? I'm just so
Right.
like, well, maybe, right? Maybe.
Maybe. Maybe.
Um,
Let's acknowledge that. Yeah.
exactly, right? And then let's discern, okay, how does this structure support me? How does the system support me? Maybe it's only about the paycheck that it supports me with. Like hopefully not. Not hopefully not the only thing, but maybe. But so it's like, okay, well, I'm engaging in this structure, um, and I'm choosing to because I want to have I want to pay my bills, and I get my bills paid,
Absolutely.
right? And
Yeah.
then like, okay, and how can I keep supporting myself amidst that, right?
Right.
And so that's where it comes into these personal practices. Like if we're working in a place, let's just use Amazon warehouses. I've never worked in
Oh
one
my
of those.
gosh.
I don't actually know anyone that has worked in those firsthand, but I know that they're like very speedy. Like you barely have time to do anything, right? So if we
Mhm.
we choose the extreme, right? How can I slow down when it's not a structure of slowing down? Well, the slowing down isn't going to look slowing down from physical movement, but it might be attention. How can I feel
Mhm.
my feet when I'm running across this big manufacturing plant or this
Right.
warehouse? Like, how can I connect to my breath even though I'm like running from thing to thing to thing? How can I
Right.
feel the weight of gravity? How can I use my attention to orient to things that are important for my nervous system to feel regulation?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
those are the things that I would do. It does become kind of an inside job when we're in structures that don't care about our wellness. No.
Right. Well, and I want to go back to that discernment piece
Yeah. Thank you.
because um those are all great in the moment practices, and if you rewind the tape and go way back, if someone comes into one of my classes or comes for a private lesson, I um, of course, am not going to say to them, oh, well, you move that way because you've taken on society's
Mm, mm,
idea that you have to force yourself and that you are made up of parts rather than a whole. So you're moving these parts independently, that's causing stress. No, they can't do anything with that. Right. And even if I brought it into their awareness, which it's not in their awareness, it, it, if someone has caused themselves pain through that kind of behavior because they've absorbed that kind of um, ideology about the human body,
yeah.
um,
Training. Yeah.
they're not aware of it, and my making them aware of it
Mm,
doesn't really help. In fact, it just brings up more fear.
mm,
Like,
mm,
what have I done to myself?
yeah.
And it's important to me when I'm in a system to recognize when people are blind to the system, which is most of the time, and when they're actually complicit in it, right? Because it does help me connect more to people if I realize, like, oh, they can't even see it. They're
Mm,
not aware that they're treating me like a part. They don't even know that they've bought into this idea. And
mm,
instead, I just have to focus on what's available to me now, right?
mhm.
So,
Right. Right.
which is where you were going with this in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think if what I'm hearing from that last piece is for the person who asked the question, like her workplace might not be ready for what for wellness, right?
Well, and
For
it's going to take a long time. In other words, no one who comes for a lesson is going to feel, they'll start to feel better, but
mm,
they won't be a completely different person in 2 days, right?
right.
All these changes are, in order to stick, in order for the learning to happen, have to be really slow and small. And they really have to be experiments, like what's available to me now? How can I experiment with that?
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
explore those variations and then you move on to the next one. So rather than thinking big, which we love to do because we're so good at organizing, making meaning, we actually have to go the other way and think small in order
Yeah,
to get to
exactly.
the
Think
big.
small. Right. Yes. So like I hear us weaving in and out of the micro and macro, the macro of
Yes.
the system that we're working in, the micro of the system that we're working in here, right? And how do we know that the system in here moves through small change, the systems out there work through small change, and how do we honor um, the system that needs something that the external system isn't ready or willing to acknowledge
Right.
or honor, right? And
Or
like,
where is the system ready? Like, where are
oh,
those people in
yeah,
your organization who you can connect to?
yeah, that's a great thing. Like, what what conversations can we have with who?
With
Um,
who?
and if we are working in a system that says they're about well-being, and says they're
Right.
about um, wellness and how whatever words we want to give to it, then who do we talk to? How can we bring that conversation in? I think that sometimes that happens. We want to jump to that, and the invitation is to slow down and have that conversation within
Yes.
ourselves, almost like to get our own internal basements a little bit more connected with,
Yeah.
so that we're not trying to go after the system before we've really gotten in our connected with our own system. Like, oh, what can we do? Like, how can we right alignment? How can we get some health in here? Um,
Hmm.
and so that our own internal sense of sovereignty is strengthening, so that then we can have those conversations outside of ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I would add to what you've said that the way in my work, the way to get health is to um, foster connection. So in my
Mm-hmm.
world, what you're saying is connect to yourself first,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And not to fix, but just to notice, like, oh, if I move this way, I feel this. If I move this way, I feel this, without judging, just
Yeah,
figuring
exactly.
out what's what. And
Yeah.
then you can slowly move on to, like, if I move in this way with this person, what happens? And if I slightly vary and move this way, then what happens? We're not ever
Yeah.
like going big. We're just
Right. Yeah.
connecting to self, connecting
Yeah.
to
Oh my
other,
God.
embodied relational presence.
And
In
I'm
fact, if you want to go for the change, it's not going to happen. How's that?
well, yeah, what I'm hearing is this tenderness actually. Like I'm
Oh,
feeling this tenderness, like for the
yeah,
human. Like,
yeah,
oh, mercy to the human, like mercy to us, because we're feeling this necessity for something different. And part of our nervous system and part of our self, just we want it now. We
yes.
want it now because it's like this is untenable, and we know that, we can feel that. And so
Mm,
the tenderness inside of me comes knowing that, gosh, um, like a compassion for the wanting it now,
yes.
and also a compassion for the necessity to slow down, to name, like, okay, I want it now, but and what's possible now, like what.
And what's possible now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm coming back to this question. I found it, and I, because I love their languaging. They said, like, to give my living self some breathing room. And I'm like, oh yes,
Mm,
like our living selves need breathing room because we're breathing creatures, we're
mm,
relational
mhm,
creatures,
mhm,
and how do
mhm,
we give our living selves, not our machine selves, we're not machine selves, how do
mm.
we give our living selves breathing room, right? And that question is a big question. It doesn't have linear answers because we're not machines. It has relational answers, and it
Mhm.
might be different in every moment. Like if I ask myself, like, what brings my living self breathing room right now? That's the answer that just came.
Mm,
It's like,
mhm.
like let me feel my hand on my being, and let so that my breath can actually fill up my system.
Mhm.
I'm leaning into this question from experiential somaticness.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's what then showed up, as my somatic system showed up. And I want to say, like, my system feels really different in this moment now than it did like 10, 30 seconds ago. I feel like my
Yeah.
tailbone is more in alignment. I feel my tailbone is in alignment with the top of my head, and I feel the space in between. And I also feel all the way down to my feet. Like, because I've moved my body in a different way, my shoulders are back and down. My chest is more filled with capacity to breathe.
Mhm.
And so there isn't a right answer to that question. It's a beautiful question, right? And
Mhm.
what will come and what it necessitates is a slowing down to ask the
Mm.
question, not from this
Mhm.
head place, but from the body place. And then what comes is an answer, but it might not be satisfying to the ego personality that wants this structure to effing change right now, right? It
Yeah.
might be much more, like you said, much more subtle. What's just
Yeah.
what adjustment can we do right now? Maybe it's water.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a repositioning. Maybe it's a pillow under the feet or a pillow behind the back. Maybe it's
Yeah.
saying to my client, like, "Ooh, it's been a busy day. Like, I'd like to
Yeah.
just pause for a moment and
Yeah.
breathe, and just ground before we begin." Right? That's which might
Mhm.
be really vulnerable in certain conditions in the wellness industry.
Yeah.
It's wanting us to
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, it's interesting because part of my training is in um talking with um kids uh, with
Mm,
I'm trying to find words that I like, not that the system uses, but
mm,
talking with kids whose brains don't necessarily fit the
mm,
cultural norm.
yeah.
And
Oh,
one alternative we offer them if they don't come up with it on their own, and often they have their own languaging, which is beautiful, is to say, I need a moment.
I need a moment. Mm. Such a gift
Hmm,
to say that, and it's so
right?
hard in a moment to say that,
My
right?
gosh. Yeah. But
Mm,
that's not, I don't think I was ever taught to ask if I needed a moment. Um, I was taught to take a break and absent myself if I thought I was going to
mm,
go kaboom. But to be able to do that moment to moment, like I can just say that even before I'm getting close to kaboom.
yeah,
I mean, it gives
what
me a
I did,
pause for a
like,
breath.
yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, I was, like, having a flashback, what I did as a child is I dissociated. I kind of went up to the ceiling or went somewhere else,
Yeah.
left my body. I
Yeah.
got that break. It
Yeah.
wasn't a real break.
No. It's as good as it got, though.
Yeah, and no one was like, "Ooh, like, I can see this is hard for you.
Mm,
We can slow down with this." Like,
right.
never in my
Right.
childhood do I ever remember that. And my parents weren't taught that, right? Like, my mom,
No.
no one, we're not taught relationality, you know?
Yeah.
So, oh, what a beautiful thing to say.
Yeah.
You need a moment, or do you need a moment?
Do you need a moment? Oh, I like that. Yeah. And I also want to encourage everyone to use whatever is at your disposal,
Mm.
right? If we find ourselves surrounded by machines, it's okay to use them.
Mm.
If we're surrounded by people who speak machine language, we can express our intent using machine language. I can say, I'm thinking when I
Mm.
really mean I'm processing, I'm trying to digest, I'm
Mhm.
integrating. They wouldn't understand what I meant if I said that. But when people are pressing me and I say, oh, I'm thinking, I
Mm.
need a moment, they
Yeah,
get that,
yeah,
right? That's the bridge.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
even computers process, right? Like, we have the little spinning whatever, right?
We need those.
Yeah, my system's, like, having the spinning. I just give me a second,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, being, um, quite rather very neurodivergent myself,
Yeah.
learning how to express, when my brain is tapped,
Mm,
my loved ones, and, like, I'm thinking particularly of my kid right now. Like, I remember the first time I may have said to her, "My brain's really full right now." Like,
yeah.
um, or a common one for me is, my kid is, can be very enthusiastic, and and I love that about my kid.
Yeah.
And it can throw me into sensory overload. Like,
Yeah.
the data can be too much, right? And so I might just say to my kid, like, can we talk quieter?
Yeah.
And like, at this point, she knows what that means. It doesn't mean she's saying anything wrong. It
Right.
doesn't mean I'm not interested. It
Right.
just means, like, it's actually my brain that needs space. It's not anything that she's doing. It's my system.
Yeah.
But we're often not attuned to our own systems. So for the
Yeah.
first more than half of her life, I didn't know how to have those
Right.
conversations. I wasn't
Right.
in well relationship with my own system to
Right.
know, like, oh,
I'm feeling something.
something's going on here, right?
Yeah.
My modus was just to dissociate on some level. And there's nothing wrong, like, clearly, I always do the caveat, there's nothing wrong with dissociating. Like,
It's another tool.
it's another tool. It's super powerful, helpful, useful in
Yeah.
certain contexts. It's not
Right.
sustainable, but it
Yeah.
is useful. And so now I
Yeah.
don't have to do that really. I can be like, oh, hold on, like, hold on.
Yeah.
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 We were
And
driving. Go ahead.
I think that's really reassuring. Like if we're talking about negotiating with other people, other systems, it's really reassuring to me, like when I'm dealing with my own system, and to other people when I don't say I'm that's not allowed. I'm saying here's another option. So you're using one option, here's another option, and always bringing it back to being really curious about what the intention is.
Mm,
Because um, sometimes people don't, again, haven't made the connection between the fact that their intention, that the things that they're doing don't match up with their intention,
mm-hmm,
right? And so even asking, what are you hoping to have happen here?
mm-hmm,
And then being curious and digging into that not only fosters connection, signals interest, but then helps me say, like, oh, that's really interesting because what I'm doing won't actually get us there.
mm-hmm, right.
Right.
Yeah,
And then there's an opportunity to experiment together, which
right.
is how you
Exactly.
start forming this dynamic system.
Yeah. You get creative together, right? We're getting creative.
Exactly.
Like, okay, this is happening. This is happening. How do we be in we-ness? We have to be in
Exactly.
that shared
Yeah.
we-ness
Yeah.
that we want to that helps us both thrive with
Yeah.
or in. It is possible, like, but it does require communication, which again is not human, this culture's strong suit. Like, we're not really
Yeah.
taught in our early years, or if ever, how to slow down and be in communication with this, and then communication with this, and communication, like all the levels of
Right.
communication, right? We do have access to, we can learn how to have access to. Takes a
And we
while.
have to bring in the dumpster fire that was COVID, right? Like we
Oh,
were already headed in a certain direction communication wise, and taking everything online and isolating people only made it easier for people to avoid weenus.
yeah, yeah.
So I really feel like people are still
Hmm.
getting back in touch with weenus in a way,
Yeah.
or have completely given up on it. There are a number of people. So that's
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean,
yeah.
I think you and I, because our set and setting is different. Um,
Mm,
I've been doing Zoom work for forever. That's how I started.
mm, mhm.
Well, I started in all the realms. I started both in person, but also in Zoom, and also
Yeah.
like um, more just in the psychic realm, I suppose. So lots of different layers. But my
Yeah.
trainings have always been, my courses have always been Zoom,
Yeah.
and so there is definitely weeness that happens with my clients that
Yes.
didn't, like, thank goodness, right? Like I already knew how to do that with folks, or be in that space with folks
Yes.
across Zoom, um, through Zoom.
And I
um,
feel it with you now. So it's
yeah,
working.
yeah, right. uh, and um, and yeah, there is something about a human body, some human bodies that really require in person, um,
Mm,
or don't know, how to utilize attention, is really what I think is more true. When someone says to me, I can't do Zoom, I, of course, I respect that, but I
sure.
also want to explore, like, what's happening, what
Right.
limitations can we connect with to see what's possible, right? If people don't want to do Zoom, and they don't want to even explore that conversation, that's fine too. They just come in to my home. But for a
Right.
while, like that wasn't an option.
Right.
Right. And for you, like well, the first year of knowing you was right after COVID started. And so my learning with you was on Zoom and it was powerful.
It
Like I
is.
remember I was doing it on
Absolutely.
this floor right
Yeah.
next to me and I had the computer right there
Yeah.
and I was following your instruction and that
Yeah.
weakness did happen, but it was different. It wasn't hands-on,
Right.
it was, and then like what was it, a year and a half later, I got to come in for like
Right.
actual live sessions with you.
Right.
It's
And
really
I apologize. I apologize profusely if I gave you the impression that I was saying that Zoom isn't a useful
oh no no
tool.
no no, I didn't hear
I
that. No,
um
it's
it's
just
that
different.
um in holding that tenderness for other people,
Mm.
sometimes it's important to remember, like, oh, their walking muscles have totally atrophied because they've been sitting for a year. Well, a lot of people's in-person muscles have atrophied
Yeah yeah
because
yeah.
very few people actually conducted Zoom, and we're lucky to know people who like Lucy, who are very much into how do we promote connection, how do we
Mhm.
promote embodied relational presence via Zoom, who are into that, but so few people got that training.
Yeah yeah.
So that's another question to ask, like, is that connection available to me via Zoom, or is how is this person going to connect better?
Mhm mhm.
What's available to me? What
Yeah,
can
what's
I
available?
discern?
Yeah yeah yeah, absolutely. But
Yeah,
I mean, I think like what you're saying is really important to slow down with just how COVID has been really hard for nervous systems and bodies and brains and hearts and minds, like in different ways. And for some people, it's been really, it has had some, it has provided some good things, or however we want to phrase that, right?
absolutely.
And for other people, it's really been isolating,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's not something to just quickly pass by.
So thank goodness for groups like yours, because
Mm,
you do bring people back um, to themselves.
yeah, yeah, yes. Back to ourselves in relationship. Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
connection here first, then connection here.
yeah.
Yeah,
And sometimes in the beginning with students and clients, it starts the other direction because that's just what we know. But
yeah,
that's the slow um, learning is to see how it
yeah,
can be from here first, and then I can include you from here. But this is a
yeah,
foreign language to lots of us, particularly as survivors, where we had to make the external world everything. Like we didn't actually get to have a sovereign sense of self, or we didn't know what that would mean or look like, or agency
mm,
was not like no,
mm,
didn't get to
yeah,
have that. So we had to forfeit. Um, we didn't even get to forfeit it because it was never created to begin with, right? We actually need loving folks in our lives to help us find a sovereign sense of self when we're young beings.
yeah,
If that's skipped over and the opposite happens, and we're raised by folks who are kind of making themselves the center of the universe, at a time when we actually need to be the center of the universe in our young little bodies and minds and hearts, then we won't know how to have. And so we
yeah.
survivors, we're trained to start out here first. We're trained to orient out here first.
But
So
it's never too late.
it's never too late. It's never too late. And that brings us to neuroplasticity, right? Because it's never too late because we are relational creatures, always learning and always shifting and growing, like no matter if we want to or not. Our neuroplasticity is they say plastic, which is it cracks me up, but it's malleable, right?
Yes.
So it's malleable, which means that we can learn in any direction, we can learn what's not useful for us and align to that. We can learn different ways that are useful for us and
Yeah,
align to that. And this
yeah.
brings us to that, like that's how we're not machines. We're not
Right.
machines that just like linearly learn X and Z or whatever. We're in constant co-creation with ourselves here and here. And so
Yes.
we absolutely can learn. I mean, if like you
Yeah.
and I are like living models of that, like
Every
we're
day.
radically different than how we were raised and how we were even 5 years
Yes.
ago or last year.
Thank you.
Because we
Yeah.
use our brains and our nervous systems in this purposeful way of co-creation. And
Yeah.
it brings more and more, it's like the gift that keeps on giving, right? Because once you
Right.
learn that, then you're in relation to how nature actually works,
Hmm.
opposed to how culture wants us to believe that we work.
Right. So in your, because you have an upcoming group coming, right?
Yeah, I do. Well, I'm in a current group. I'm in like
Yes.
almost the halfway mark of a 6 month course group, Matrix Gathering, and uh, and then we will begin Matrix Integration 2023 in March. And so
Wow.
so it'll be the third year that we're having it, and we this is the stuff. This is like the stuff that we connect with. This literal rewiring, because you do
Hmm.
rewiring too. It's a literal rewiring, and we do it, yes, here, and we do it with each other, which is how change happens the fastest. It's like
Hmm.
through and
Hmm.
relationality, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
um, I was just reading a post today that somebody wrote. So we do a lot of our work in an app called Slack, and we write our
Yeah.
practices out and we share them, like for us to
Hmm.
see each other. So we see each other and we feel each other,
Mm.
model humaning with each other, not perfect humaning. We model humaning.
Right. Yeah.
And we relate through that sharing, and that sharing
Hmm.
is very, very powerful. It's like when we're reminded that other humans are humaning like we are, then all of a
Mm.
sudden the shame starts to like do that. Like, oh, I'm not just a dumb whatever. I'm not broken. I'm not fill in the blanks of what, even
Right.
psychology or spirituality will tell us.
I know.
I've just actually um, have thought I'm supposed to be this way, that culture tells me I should be, but I'm
Right.
actually a human being that feels and has worries and doubts and feels sadness and feels grief and feels anger and hate and rage and love and joy and abundance, like all the
Hmm.
fullness of all of it, right? Okay, I'm
Right.
just getting excited and I'm like starting to go off, but
Well, you should be excited. You should be excited because there's something special about having a community
mm,
that then leverages technology in a way that makes sense, because by using a Slack group, you get rid of the little fear response that comes up by doing this, say, in a Facebook community, or because there are lots of online communities out there,
yeah,
but they tend to then become performative.
yes,
Even if you're performing, I'm not, I'm such a flawed human being. That's a performance too. And
mhm,
then you're not actually relating to yourself, and you're definitely not relating to others. You're just worrying about surviving in that community. So I like it, um, that you establish a community in person on Zoom where you relate to each other through embodied practices, right? You can feel other people and be in your body with other people, even though you're distant. So that some of that carries over to your Slack group. And it's about coming back to yourself, letting go of those those fixed ideas of what should, and just being with each other.
yeah, yes, yeah. I got distracted for a second because I was thinking a number of things. One of them, just a housekeeping thing, which is that if people are have questions and they might be
Yeah.
asking in the live, we actually can't see the
Can't
live
see
right
it.
now, so we can't. If there are any questions, we actually can't see them. So you can text me if you have a question. Um, and then there was a couple other things that are coming up.
Yeah.
Um, with regards to how we learn and grow, and I think it's related to another question that somebody sent in, which is she said plants are affected by seasons, and in what ways do you see people affected by seasons, right? So
Mhm.
everything affects everything, including seasons. Right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I love that question because here we are on solstice. It's the
Yes.
darkest night of the year.
Yes.
And then tomorrow starts another cycle, right? So
Yeah.
we've been moving towards the pinnacle, or the epoch. I don't know, the height of
Ah.
darkness, the height of darkness. And then all of a sudden we start to move towards the height of light, of sun,
Mhm.
right? And so it really shows, um, in the nature of existence, this relationship of light and dark, which
Yeah.
my next course is really talking about the shadow and abundance and how they always coexist. And so light and dark are never separable. We're but yes, so like if we look at animals, we look at, I mean, I'm always looking at the trees right there, and like, of course, nature is affected by the seasons,
Yeah.
right? And we too we are nature.
Yes.
So if we're paying attention, we will notice, right? If we're paying attention, we will notice our systems start to change. And we don't live in a culture that's really honoring the cycles, of that change. So it can take effort to be like, oh yeah, my system's in a time of more hibernation, or requires more slowness, or requires more sleep, or requires a different kind of food, or and right, can be lots of different components that our unique systems go through as the seasons change. Like,
Mhm.
what's your
I
what's
love this because the trees can respond to the seasons because
Mhm.
they're sensing the changes in the light, the changes in the temperature. If we isolated trees in a place where the light was always constant, if
Mm,
all those changes were absent, the tree would not change
mhm.
because it couldn't sense it. Or if
Right.
we disabled the mechanisms for sensing, the tree could not change. So, what I take from the seasons question is that that's our great gift. If we allow ourselves to feel, to perceive, and to notice even
Mhm.
the smallest changes, we
Yeah.
too can change. But
Yes.
and another friend of mine has a great saying. She says, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yeah.
So if we want to be growing dynamic beings,
Yeah. Yeah.
we need to be open to perceiving change and allow that to evoke change in us, even if it's tiny small.
Tiny small. Because I'm thinking again
Yeah.
of my other client who is like, you know, um, she's so aware that like her system needs something different, and she's in a
Yeah.
structure that doesn't acknowledge that. Right?
Right.
It's like, okay, here we are in a season in North America that's being called to slow down and honor in alignment with what's happening, right? In nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And her structure is like, no, I don't care, right? And so
Right.
how do you do that? And I'm asking myself that all the time, like, okay, um,
Mhm.
life doesn't life as we know it, as it's been created, doesn't stop for our humaning,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately, right? So how do I do that? What do I need to do, right?
Right.
And for me, I have to get really creative, and see like what changes, little changes can I make, right?
Yeah.
It might mean like I take off notifications, right? Or I don't bring my phone to bed.
Mhm.
Which
Mhm.
or I mean, so many things. Like, my system is needing time and attention. It's needing
Mhm.
time and space to discern, like particularly right now, like right
Yeah.
at the change of the new year, and
Mhm.
in a time that's called for us to deeply discern what's working here in our created that I've created in my reality, and what's not,
Mhm.
and am I in alignment with my desires, right? Am I
Yeah.
actually in alignment? And these are important questions. These are questions that I have all the tools and practices to answer.
Mhm.
And then it requires the willingness and some effort on my part to be like, ooh, can I ask these hard questions? Can I slow down and discern, can I let go of maybe whatever I need to let go of to create some space? And I don't, well, for every person that's going to be different. It
Right.
might be like, but it will often require some effort, and and I use the word effort because change doesn't come without effort, and so it might feel like like almost some self-sacrifice, like, well, I'm gonna
Mm.
sacrifice or give up or let go of that part of me that does want to do X.
Hmm.
um
The brain will hang on to the old,
yes,
even if it doesn't serve you.
that's right. And go, okay, I want to do that. I do get comfort or relief from that, but do I really? you know
Mm.
can do I'm going to forego that for something, because I want something different, that I need some time and
Yeah.
space to discern, because I need some quiet time.
So I'm going
Mm.
to tell you a story about adults versus kids.
Oh,
So
cool.
when kids get movement lessons and you ask them, doesn't that feel better? And of course, it's a leading question, but and you ask them, doesn't that feel better? You don't even have to ask the question. You're asking it because their faces light up. They're
Aw.
like, oh, they suddenly something clicks and they're like, yes, this is how to move more comfortably and efficiently. And no one has told them they can't do the old thing, but they're like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And you ask an adult, and they're like, I don't know. Like adults are the only ones who will go, no, I like my old, inefficient, uncomfortable better.
Mhm.
And I never challenge that,
Mm. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Because it's
And
just neuroplasticity. It's not a moral thing.
no,
Yeah.
no.
So just to be clear, so everyone knows what we're talking about here.
Yes, 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 yes. It's
Yeah.
just the brain has gotten really good at that habit
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it will defend it to the death.
Yeah.
And so the trick to slow, tiny changes is to be blind to the
Mm.
not the how, but the how am I going to make this work? You don't know how, you
Mm.
don't know when. You're just going to have faith that if you do it in this way, in a way that respects the nervous system, that it will work out.
Yes. And you don't even
Right.
need faith, because once you've done it,
Right.
once you can be like, oh, we just did X, and my
Exactly.
nervous system is feeling this.
Right.
Like, we want to slow down so the neuroplasticity and all the parts of ourselves can be like, oh, like, wow, this is really counterintuitive.
Mm,
Like, doing this different thing
right.
is yielding what I desire, which is
Right.
like a sense of whatever, fill in the blank, but
Yeah.
consciousness or
Yeah.
nervous system. And so then I can take that, like remembering, like into the
Yeah.
future, like, okay, I remember when I did the opposite of what I normally do. I got a I got what I wanted.
You
I
have
got
that
what I desired.
feeling
Yeah.
like this works.
Yes.
Like
And
just like you get a feeling getting on a bike. If I do this, this works.
yes. And that this works feeling, it's a slow coming, right?
Mm,
And so
very.
it does take that effort and willingness to be like, oh, I want to do that learned way, but I'm going to do this new learned way that doesn't yet feel smooth, right? Like, I always use this analogy, like, you don't learn how to ride a bike on a hill. You learn
Right.
to ride a bike on like even pavement and good weather conditions. So we start the
Yeah.
practices in simple places and simple.
Yes.
We bring attention to the actual factual, and we're just eating, or we're watching TV, or we're just
Yeah.
staring out the window. Not in our hardest moments. We learn
Right.
newness in our easiest moments, and then
Yes.
the neuroplasticity catches up and starts to extend itself into
Yes.
harder situations.
Yeah. And the key for um, all of it, small or big, simple or not so simple, is not knowing. You
Yes.
have to allow yourself to not know because the moment you know is the moment you've cut off possibilities. Because if you know, it means you have one trajectory in mind, right? But we're trying to build neuroplasticity, lots of different options in the brain. So you have to let go of knowing, let go of
Mm.
knowing how you're going to get there, what what the process is going to be. You don't know,
don't know.
which is so scary.
Just know what you've already connected with. And
Yes.
that's the knowing you stay with.
Yes.
In my courses, we talk about this as beginner's mind, which is a Buddhist principle.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh has amazing videos about beginner's
Yes.
mind. And so
Yeah.
we are invited to stay in beginner's mind. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
how it will look in
Right.
X later, right? The mind always wants
Yes.
to go to past or future, but I
Yeah.
know what it feels like now.
Yeah.
So can I keep coming back to now and practice what I'm learning now?
Can I
That's a big ask.
continually be in the process of discovery? I call it process of discovery.
Mhm.
And each time you just,
Yeah, yeah.
it's,
Uh,
yeah, totally fun. Oh, your next group is going to have so much fun.
and you're doing a group locally
I
um,
am.
on Sunday?
Sunday mornings. So it's not every Sunday morning, but if you go to the Nourishing Heart Yoga website, or you can eventually get to that link through my social. It's on my social media links on Facebook or Instagram. But I have group classes at Nourishing Heart Yoga about 3 times a month, Sundays at 10:30.
I think at 10:30. Yeah, in
Yeah.
person.
In person. Is that crazy or
Oh
what?
my gosh. So
Yeah.
Bloomingtonians can access that. Although you still do, like, if people are listening from other places, I know some of my students have connected to you via Zoom,
Yeah.
for Zoom work, and I know that, so that's still accessible. Like,
That's still accessible. I'm just so glad everyone out there is discovering all there is to discover again now that the world has changed yet again.
forever and ever. Amen.
Forever and ever. Yeah. What's next?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We're almost at the top of the hour. Do we have any other things that we want to dash out, or I'm feeling pretty
Mm,
complete?
I need a moment.
I love it. I could feel it. I was like, oh yeah, a moment.
It's all about change. It's all about change, and not change in the way like night to day, like flipping on and off the switch, but that slow dawn, right? Like, is it dawn now? Now? If you've been awake when the sun first comes out, you're like, oh, now it's light. No, wait, now it's light. No, wait, now it's light.
Yeah,
It's all
yeah.
about this change, this continuous dawn, right? So may you have continuous dawn as you enter this new
Oh.
season.
Well, and I don't think that your language is on accident, because change, like nature is showing us right now, that change is slow. And we are
Yeah.
going to be slowly seeing more
Yeah.
light now after
Yeah.
starting tomorrow. And we'll
Yeah.
get to see it in real time. We'll get to see change happen, like,
Yes.
slowly, incrementally, until one
Yes.
day we'll be like, oh my gosh, like, do you remember when we had, like, the sun went down at 4:30 and now it's going down at 5:30? And we get to feel the change and see the change. Like, this is how change literally
Mm.
happens in experiential land. And we are
Yeah.
experiential creatures. So our changes will happen the same way, slow. Mm.
Yeah.
Aw, thanks so much for starting my solstice off this way this morning.
As always, thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. I
Mm.
I am so happy in my body right now. Thank you, Lisa.
Lots of love to you and to